G'day guys, so it's 20 here and welcome back to Springwood. Thought I'd do something a little bit different and start today's episode off with some nighttime cinematics. I usually do daytime cinematics of Springwood, but I thought it's been a while, so I might just show you what Springwood looks like at night. And man, it is looking pretty good, to be honest. I feel like the nighttime shots really make the city look like a realistic city, mostly because it can hide quite a lot of the gaps that we have in Springwood. You know, we have been working on this series for a long time, 54 episodes to be exact. Actually, that's not even to be exact because I've been working on this before I was releasing on YouTube, but basically it's been a while and we have completed so much, yet we still have so much more to go. And that can be a little bit daunting when playing this game and working on this series for so long. But looking at the city at nighttime, it kind of makes me feel like I have completed a fair bit. So yeah, it's kind of nice to see the city at night. Today's episode, we're going to be working on the same area that we've been working on over the last few weeks. I know we've been working on this area for a while, but I did want to complete this area over the next couple more weeks at least, and then we'll move on to a couple of other locations. And today's episode, yeah, we are working on some more residential areas, kind of similar to what we've been doing. I also wanted to work on the highway too, because it splits up this neighborhood that I'm working on, and there's some really interesting things that happen when highways intersect a neighborhood. So I wanted to work around there. We're going to be doing a bit of light rail work too, which is really exciting because I love working around the light rail. And at the very end of the episode, I'm going to be doing a bit of detail work on the sunken highway that really splits up the two neighborhoods that I guess we're sort of working on. By the way, if you're interested in the exact location we're working in Springwood, we are working in Kensington, which is pretty close to the downtown, and it is predominantly a poorer neighborhood sandwiched between what is more of the wealthier neighborhoods of Springwood. I guess this place is just a little bit unfortunate in its location, being right underneath this very busy interchange and also quite close to the commercial district of Springwood downtown. So it is a little bit more on the poorer side of residents. However, you know, being so close to the downtown also has its benefits, I guess, too. So, you know, not all the neighborhoods, so not all the houses around here are, you know, on the poor side of things. You know, as soon as you cross the highway, that's when houses get a lot wealthier. And that's quite common, you know. Sometimes all it takes is crossing a bridge and all of a sudden the demographic completely changes, which is what I kind of like about this particular area, how much it can change just by one highway. And that is pretty much the case within this actual area. And what I'm building right now is a government housing block. I got the inspiration from one that I discovered in LA, and I actually had pretty much the exact style building, which is created by King Leno. He does a really amazing job at creating some really, really high quality building assets, and they seem to be the building assets that I probably use the most within Springwood. But I was really quite amazed at finding the exact style of housing within this area, so that was quite useful. And there's a couple of different styles of buildings, so there's a couple of different variations. Some are a bit longer, some are a little bit taller. So just like making up a bit of a mix between the different styles of buildings and just trying to follow exactly the types of structures and layout of these particular houses. And government housing, for those of you who don't know, this is blocks of land that are developed by the government, and it's basically an initiative to, you know, provide cheap or an affordable housing to people who, you know, who are struggling financially or have lost their jobs or, you know, have disabilities, or just families who just can't get into the, you know, renting market or can't afford to buy a house. So it's a really great initiative. It's awesome to see these sort of houses, and they're so iconic because they're generally just a block of land with the exact same type of unit or house on there, and they're quite run down. They're generally quite old and in desperate need for some extra funding, and probably needed to slap a lot more of these down in Springwood, scenes as this is quite an expansive city and we have so many different types of communities around here. I've made a few of these types of houses around the place, but not to the extent or the size of what I've made right now. And in terms of how this looks, in terms of realism, I think it's pretty bang on the money. I'm really happy with how this turned out, and I'm doing some really simple techniques just to make building these blocks really easy for myself. So as you can see, I've just sort of built one in one particular on one particular block of land, and then pretty much just getting the generic look of it, and then just copying and pasting it onto other blocks. And because the blocks aren't exactly the same size, I am just deleting certain areas just to reshuffle it around, and then that way it does create that little bit of uniqueness, depending on what block of land this sits on. And the formula that I'm going for is, I'm just trying to keep the footpaths going from door to door, pretty much using these really thin, I don't really know what they're called, but they're these really thin footpaths that I got from the Steam workshop. And they're technically not touching each other. They're just overlapping. So I don't know if people will actually walk from path to path, but in the cinematics at the end, you will see people walking along them, which is really cool. These areas generally have some sort of community recreational area, so whether it be a park or basketball courts, there's generally parking, and the grounds are generally quite open, so there's quite a lot of open grassed area as well. So wanted to try and keep with that theme, and I thought it turned out pretty cool actually. I will actually make another one in the next episode, and we'll make it a lot larger than this one, because these are so common in cities, and particularly in LA, this particular style of government housing. And yeah, I really love the way this thing turned out. And in the cinematics, you'll see at the very end, there are just some really great shots of what this looks like, in comparison with the whole city. It really flows, and it really just shows that there's so many different neighborhoods within this place that I really love, because I generally look at Springwood from as a whole, and I just love the way this thing turned out. But we're moving on from there now and working on the underpass of this highway. I was looking at a couple of different ones around LA, and what I noticed is that these highways are generally the barrier of neighborhoods, and they mark where a neighborhood starts and finishes. So generally the style of neighborhood will change depending on where the highway is, and I wanted to continue that idea within Springwood and sort of create this one particular style of neighborhood on one side of this highway, and then on the other side create something completely different. And I'm also just using these retaining walls to just drag underneath the highway too, because I wanted there to be a really distinct barrier, and generally these highways do have some sort of wall underneath them, especially if they're raised, then they have a wall. If they're lowered underneath the grounds or below the grounds, then they will have some sort of wall that's for soundproofing too. So yeah, I think that also just reinforces the wall or the barrier between the different neighborhoods. And because when you see these highways from bird's eye view, it's not until you actually get down low onto street view, you can actually see where the particular barriers are, and how separate these neighborhoods actually are. And generally there's actually not very many roads that get connected between these highways as well. So usually there will be a main road that might go underneath it, but generally roads are disconnected, and you can actually see where roads used to be connected, and then as they've developed these highways, they've then just chopped them off and just kept the main roads, which makes sense. I'm sure it's expensive to build bridges or underpasses underneath highways, and generally you don't really need it. People are usually making the transition from neighborhood to neighborhoods via highways anyway, or main roads. So I've just got one road going underneath, and even that road in itself probably isn't that necessary, but I figured I'd use it because it does then connect up to what is the tram station that'll be within this neighborhood, and I thought, you know, then that makes a bit of sense. You know, if people are trying to make, or if people are making the transition from their neighborhoods to that tram station, then there needs to be some sort of road access there. And now we're working on a different neighborhood. So this is the neighborhood that is on the other side of the highway, opposite Kensington. This neighborhood is called Lyell, and if you're wondering where I'm getting these names from, these are names that are already been pre-made on the Springwood wiki, which is in the description below if you want to go and check it out. But there's already a pre-existing story for that, and this neighborhood in particular is a more up-and-coming and wealthier neighborhood. And this particular portion of Lyell is probably a bit of a mix between the two. I wouldn't call it a very wealthy neighborhood, but it is, I guess, more the middle class sort of, more middle class Sims that are living in this area. And this time I've actually gone down to Street View because I wanted to get a good idea of what houses really looked like. I really wanted to keep this sort of basic, so I'm just using vanilla assets, and I'm just looking at Street View to get some ideas of what houses look like in terms of neighborhoods. And in this particular neighborhood, I noticed that so many of the houses look exactly the same. There might be like slight variations to the houses, or one might be slightly bigger, or might have, maybe the residents have made some modifications or some renovations over the years, so it looks a little bit different. And I kind of just wanted to take that idea and just find 3 or 4 different assets they're actually completely vanilla assets from just the game, and I thought I'd just find those ones and just place them all down, and just did some real basic detail work by just dragging vanilla fences behind, and you know, it's really basic. I barely even made it so that each house had their own private backyard. I really just wanted to make it look like that at least some of the houses had some sort of privacy, and then just fill the blanks with some big trees that sort of covered some areas that I thought were a little less detailed, and even to hide some vanilla assets like some of the hedges as well that I've still got sitting around this neighborhood too. But I really just wanted to achieve that look of houses looking very similar and only having some slight variations. So from above, I think this neighborhood looks really good. I'm really happy with how this turned out, considering there are no detail has been put into this area. I've really just slapped it down, and for what it is, I think it turned out pretty good. And this is the general work that I'm doing around these neighborhoods over the last few weeks at least, and probably over the next couple of weeks too. Just trying to build up this city so that it looks really detailed and really full from like bird's eye view from actually playing the game. And then some certain areas where I do a lot more cinematics or a little more focus on, I will probably detail that as well. So for instance, this area that I'm working on right now is their underpass that will also have the raised tram station along the highway. I wanted to put in a little bit more detail work because this is actually an area of interest, whereas the neighborhoods, they're just neighborhoods. There's like, I don't know, 20 different neighborhoods in Springwood. I'm not going to detail all of them. Whereas this station is fairly unique, and I wanted to create like quite a unique looking area. So I do quite a lot of work on this station. Man, it turns out great. The cinematics at the end really show it off, so I highly encourage you guys to stick around for that. But basically what I wanted to achieve was I wanted there to be some sort of access to the street below, so that the residents around here also, well, actually they are pretty much the only residents or only people who are getting access to this station. Otherwise it has no other functionality, no one's walking along this road. That road above, by the way, is technically an avenue, but I'm treating it as sort of a highway-ish, but it, you know, I think the speed on it's not exactly highway speed. So it is really just an avenue, but there's no roads connected to it for probably about 1 kilometer. But I do think that this station has quite a lot of functionality in terms of the people who are using this particular station. This tram line, I should say, goes directly into the city, and in the opposite direction will go out into Springwood Hills, where is I guess its own city in itself, where I'll be building up a little bit more of a skyline for that area. It's going to be pretty much Hollywood Hills and Beverly Hills, but a bit more of a Springwood Australian spin on it, I guess. But I can't wait to build on that area. But this particular highway is going to be seeing quite a lot of traffic, and the tram line, when we do get it established, is going to be so awesome, because it's going to be getting quite a lot of passengers riding it too, which I really can't wait for. And going back into the detail work that I was talking about, me working on the neighborhoods, it's so important for me not to go crazy detail on some of these neighborhoods, because they the more detail basically I'm putting into it, the worse the frame rate and the worse the game actually functions. So if I do want to see the simulation and the game sort of functioning at its best in Springwood, then I do really need to chill out in some areas. And a few episodes ago I did say that that Springwood doesn't function like the game should truly function. It's the frame rate is awful, and the Sims driving around here aren't interacting with the environment quite like the game wanted us to play the game. But to be honest, there is still quite a lot of interaction between Sims and the environment. So people are going to parks, and people are going to work, and people are there are tourists who are coming into the city and then leaving the city. Although it's probably not functioning the best, it is still happening, which is really cool. And I still want that to happen. I don't want there to just be problems throughout the entire city and it be purely for aesthetics, and I can't even take it off pause. Quite often I'm playing this game unpaused, just letting the simulation run, and it's generally running pretty okay. As you can see, there's no flashing icons. There are a couple of flashing icons, but everyone's somewhat happy, which is, kind of the thing that I wanted to achieve in most of my cities at least. But yeah, to finish off this episode, I am just finishing the detail work on this sunken highway. I'm just detailing it with some general trees. I didn't really want there to be too many trees around here, but they do act as sound barriers. I don't think they really do act as sound barriers in the game, but I do know that in city planning, trees are used as sound barriers for highways and neighborhoods, and they do also act as a nice block of the view, so you don't have to see highways quite as often as you probably would if there was no tree line and they were just, built a wall or something like that. And I'm actually always quite surprised at how well highways are hidden from street view. It's not until you actually fly up and see the interconnectedness of the city and how highways actually are so ingrained within our cities that you realize how many there are of them. Whereas when you're driving around, you probably don't really realize that much. But yeah, that's it for this episode. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. This one was a hell of a lot of fun to play, and I really love how this one actually turned out. If you've enjoyed this video, leaving a like really helps out my channel, so thank you for doing that. And if you want to leave me some comments or leave some suggestions, then the comments section would be the best place. I've also got a Twitter and an Instagram account, which is also linked below. But yeah, that's it. Guys, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one. See you later.